we can talk a bit. First up on agenda for discussion is in terms of looking at our affordable housing strategy elements. And so from there, Marla, what did you have in mind for us picking up from there?
So this document was prepared by Paul for our consideration. And I think it kind of builds on what we had noted coming out of the last meeting about some things that we could discuss and focus on to give us a little bit of direction. And so I think maybe it would be better for me to kind of let Paul share some of his thoughts and ideas. And before, everyone joined, and the meeting started, we were just having even a general discussion about our ability to maybe tap into some technical assistance to really help us also hone in on what we might want to do and how we position ourselves such that we can take something to council and get their blessings to move forward with actually embarking upon a process. But I'll pause and let Paul share his ideas and what led to him sharing this document with us.
And for folks to know, that was sent in the packet for information. So we want to follow along or reference. We have that in our email documents. Paul.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, that would be good if folks could pull that up as I'm kind of walking through it a little bit, and that'll help explain things a little better. But I really feel like I've gotten a lot from the meetings that we have had because we've touched on different subjects, different initiatives, different ideas, some of them that people from the task force have brought, some of them through, thankfully, Marla's contacts. She's brought us expertise from elsewhere. And so we've been introduced to a lot of great ideas there, but I have kind of found myself, I don't know whether it was my past training as a planner or whatever, but I've found myself kind of hungering to kind of see the big picture and what is this thing that we are trying to put together, since I think our mission was to put together recommendations for the city council in terms of what does it take to have a real active, robust, affordable housing initiative for the city. And so I thought about all the different things that we've touched on, and I thought they kind of fit within different categories. So I identified 5 different categories, organizational, establishing and maintaining an affordable housing database, creating new affordable housing supply, including how much of each, preserving existing affordable housing supply, including how much of each, and then financing resources. So I think those categories covered most everything that we have talked about. You all may have some other things that I have missed on that, but then under each of those, I put the things there that I think are important to have. So for example, under organizational, I really feel, particularly after seeing everything here, that we need supplemental help, whether it's staffing or consultant, to assist in kind of developing the details of this strategy. Also, George and others have really continually brought up the important point that we've got to, as we're putting this together, we've got to get input from housing advocates in the city and stakeholders to help us understand things better, and to also communicate what we're doing. We learned this really strongly in last month in listening about New Orleans, is that we'll need an organizational entity to implement and coordinate the implementation of the plan. because there's going to be lots of actors involved, and there's going to have to be someone kind of continually holding things together there. We'll need a lot of collaboration between the nonprofit and public sectors. And so I listed there a number of entities that I think would need to be in close communication with each other. And then also something that we don't yet have, which is the community land trust. And I think we've all agreed that would be important, and figuring out a way, how do we get something going, who should be doing it, and all that. Last month with New Orleans, we were talking about lenders roundtable and how important that could be. And I also threw in maybe a private sector developers roundtable, those who are committed to doing affordable housing. So those were the different aspects of organizational. Under the housing database, I think John in particular has mentioned the importance of keeping a good database. And I know Paula has been working on that housing conditions study. That's something that would need to be on there. The inventory of housing supply by type and income level, I mean, you can see the list there of things that would need to be in that database for us to understand that. Everything all the way to inventory of sites available, including potential reuses of declining development properties for affordable housing and all that. Third category, create new affordable housing supply, and including how much of each. So we're thinking about the 17,000 units of affordable housing we need. How much of that should be coming from new product that gets put together? How much of it should be put together by preserving or improving existing product? So that's what those next two categories kind of break it down into, is how do we create those things, and how much emphasis should we be putting on those things? And depending on what types of things they are, that defines who would be involved in putting it together. Some of them would be totally private market. Some of them would take partnerships between the public and private sector. Some of them we'd have to kind of think long-term. How do we do land banking to get the sites ready? How do we change our regulations or zoning to kind of help make that work? So there's different types of things under those next two categories there. And then the final one is financing resources. So going through the whole gamut of federal resources. I don't know how much COVID money could go into this, but hopefully some. But if not, I think I've heard some talk, if the infrastructure bill gets actually passed in the form that it is, I've seen some things that housing might be considered part of infrastructure. So there might be some possibilities there, but the different sources of funding, whether they be federal, state, local, foundations. We've talked about, Tom has been very interested in employer-assisted housing, and I think he's had some conversations with some of the major actors there, and then getting the banks involved through CRA. So those were the ones that I could think of there. I may have missed some that you all think should be there. There may be an entire category that I'm missing. So I just wanted to put that out there for us to kind of think about. And if this or something like this defines what it is we're trying to put together, then the second question is, well, how do we get there? And when you look at this entire list, I just feel like we've got to have some professional help in order to do this. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Marla, but I don't think I've sensed from some of your past comments that you're really not staffed at this point to provide the level of an amount of staffing with your present staff to be able to pull all this together, to research this, put together all the details. So I guess what I'm left with is we need some professional help, whether that be by a consultant or extra staffing that is hired in. I think I'd want to rely on Marla for her take on which would be better. But I really think we've got to have some help in order to flesh this out. Maybe this is something that helps show council that this is the size of this that we got to do, and that's why we need some help. But I think that's the second key element, is getting the help to assist us in putting this together and running the process for putting it together. So I think I'll stop at this point and just see what folks think about it.
I'd just like to start by saying, great job. I think this is a really good, extensive list that outlines a really good plan. I guess, Marla, I guess my only question would be, could we take this list or something similar to City Council and just let them know some of the challenges we've had and see what their thoughts are with where we should probably get started, since this list is so long and detailed. Maybe they have some thoughts or ideas based on some of the contacts that they have with other cities or what other states are doing with their affordable housing plan. If that's out of bounds, that's fine, but just trying to throw out some different ideas.
My inclination is they're looking to us to give them a roadmap. So, yeah, that's my inclination. They really want to kind of hear what we see as the possibilities and the opportunities, and then what we recommend about the way forward. Yeah, because you know, you got two things working. One is, excuse me, the whole notion that they have professional staff whose jobs it is to get in here and get the information, get the details, make the connections, do some of what we've done to kind of support the coalition in getting where we are today. And then you have the coalition and the reason for its existence. And if one of the primary functions is to make recommendations to council about how we attack this issue, I think they would look to us collectively.
Okay, thanks.
To get that.
But aren't we saying, I mean, maybe I misinterpreted George, but aren't we saying that we have here, for the first time really, a great clear outline of what we see out there that we need to investigate even further? And to do so, we're trying to make council aware we need some help. We've done an initial overview. Now to dig deeper, we need some help. And given there's this call to action by council to bring in ideas for use of COVID funds, this might be a way to go at that and say, we've done some work, we've come up with a general idea, but now to dig deeper, you know, we need some staff, we need a consultant, we need something. Am I misinterpreting what Paul and George were saying?
No, I just wanted to jump in there just to maybe add additional color to it, because I think that both in terms of the desire and the need for it, I think from this point, I wouldn't send this document just directly without any additional information with it. So if we were sending this document, then we need to go ahead, and I don't know, Marla, if there's a way for us to figure out how to quantify what that actual personnel need is. If we're going to them saying, hey, we need additional help, sending this blankly won't get the response that I think we want, which is, hey, we need some specific resources for that. And I don't necessarily think that's what folks were saying, but I think for us to kind of shape that very specifically, saying, hey, this is where we are, this is what we've seen, and based on that, we think it's going to cost X number of dollars to help provide the technical assistance to get us to a place where we're actually able to truly engage on the specifics on what's needed. And I think if we can get to that, along with what Paul's done an amazing job working through. When I read it last night, Paul, I said, Paul, I said that zoning piece, I read it all through. I said that all those years in that work, I said it comes out in that work. But I think putting that together with the dollars and what that would specifically be used for, I think then that is a better framework on what goes with it. Marla, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think when we go to council, it'll be important to know what our ask is in terms of resources and be able to paint a picture of how the process will unfold. So what I see that Paul has provided are elements within a process, so when we talk about the need for community engagement, having the funders roundtable and certain other things, those are all things that will come up out of a larger engagement process, right? And so, I think that we would probably need to get some, what I'll call for right now, some preliminary help or TA, and maybe we can reach back out to Housing NOLA for that to say, okay, how do we just kind of shape the framework such that we know that it's going to take a great deal of engagement across the board, professional, community, and the like. We know this is a process that'll probably take, I'm just going to make this up as we go, a year to get it all done where we got a plan that we bring before council for adoption potentially. And so I think that when we go to council, there's that overarching framework. Because as I was looking at this, one of the things I was thinking about and kind of reformulating some aspects of what Paul put together, I thought about it from, okay, to get at some of what we're talking about here, what are the policies that at the end council's going to have to adopt that facilitates whatever some of these strategies are, right? And so being able to create that overarching framework where you talk about policy, I saw something in here on data, where does that fit in? And so I think that there's a little, this is what we have are actual pieces of the larger framework that we probably need to set for council. And one of the things I mentioned earlier, before a number of you were on the call, was, sad that Joe couldn't make it today because Joe asked one of the big questions, which was the cost, right? What's this going to take to do this? And recognizing his role from philanthropy, could this be also an initial item where we start to bring others to the table who could invest in this? So that it's not just a city investment, and we start the whole collaboration from a funding standpoint, even going into this. So this could be a good investment for philanthropy. This could be a good investment for a bank under CRA. And can we model something even going into our conversation with council to say, we're already going to model what this ought to be for the community and go about it in these ways. We know policy, we know data, we know fill in the blanks. And one thing too, I'll add, that'll be some additional context and maybe support. So if you all recall, Paula and I have been working on the For Everyone Home initiative. And we are wrapping that up. We may be having our final team call on Wednesday. We've gotten the final drafts of the proposed policy agenda as well as an action plan on one specific element that was identified. But that those documents also provide us with some direction and ideas that in many ways complement very well what Paul has put together and talks about potential action steps, be it the land trust, be it land banking, affordable housing trust fund locally. So it even talks about some things that really kind of dovetail with what Paul has put together. And so my hope is that in our, what are we, April? Geez. in our May meeting, you will have gotten all those documents. So we're doing final edits in the next coming days, and then the document will be produced, and they'll do a press release and all of that. But I say all that to say, some of the workings of this, I think we have a lot of good ideas and a lot of information and tools that will help us. And yes, and Paula made a note of, policy recommendations are part of that. So I think that the biggest thing maybe right now is, what's the overarching framework? What, like someone mentioned, what might this cost? And then how do we go about getting started officially? There's a sense to me that maybe a second conversation with Housing NOLA might be helpful, especially since it's free, to get a little additional TA and guidance. I don't mind leveraging my friendships and relationships, but to kind of like, how do you get started, and see what Andronika could share about just how you teed it up, It might be worthwhile to have that again as part of our next meeting. So,
Marla, a follow-up for you there on that, and maybe others have a comment on it. And I was just thinking, thought about it last night and thought about it today again with both of these again. When you brought in the other work that was happening, it jumped out again. How do we? I think we have to. The information we present to the council and others in the community in a way that we present something. I know there'll be policy recommendations, but then also a way of dealing with low-hanging fruit now, particularly for the political experience folks. The council, there's something that they feel they're going to need to act on. And they need to do something even now in the immediacy before we turn around and say, hey, we're going back into another process of review and developing something. Because we did the housing study, then you had the work from what's the name of it? Yeah, and then we'll have that report coming, and then the next ask is, well, give us some resources so that we can go develop another kind
implementation plan.
Right, yeah, but this is the implementation piece, but really just how in the middle of that though, with resources and other things that are coming. We know that some of the things that have been happening have not necessarily been working. So is there something that we can say, we're looking to do the implementation plan now, but is there some low-hanging fruit that we can put out there for, and I'm just thinking the political side that folks can hang their hat on and saying, okay, we're getting ready to do this implementation plan, but these are some things that we're gonna be doing now. And that may be some of the policy pieces that may come out, some recommendations on the right now, but I'm just thinking of what may be some retorts that folks may say.
Well, certainly, I think you're spot on with the whole thing around policy recommendations, because the For Everyone Home report has a number of them, and the one that has formed the basis of the action plan, because what the way that was set up was it was to look at what's happening. And granted, part of this is within the framework of anti-displacement and housing inclusivity, right? But what it did was look at a variety of policy recommendations, and then we took one of those recommendations and fleshed it out as an action plan. Right. And so, one of those first policy initiatives could be following through on the recommendation that was made. That recommendation that is the subject of an action plan is to create a land bank. The report says, and it's easy for me to kind of share this because it is our day-to-day work. From a practical perspective, the city has functioned as one, because we take care of a lot of properties that we call chronic violators. So every year we hire these third-party contractors to mow and clean up over 500 parcels of land throughout the city. And that's separate and apart from the work that we do on properties that have to be boarded up, or we have to abate them just on a periodic basis because the owners aren't taking care of them. And so, based on the fact that we're taking care of so many parcels, the idea is, well, why doesn't the city just get control of those parcels and then put them into productive use? Ergo, do a land bank and accomplish that objective, because we're already paying for it, right? So that's kind of one of those really low-hanging policy kind of recommendations and an action plan. And we just got the actual action plan last night. So we'll be reading over that the next couple of days to be able to give feedback before Wednesday's meeting. So back to your point, that's exactly one of the things that can be done to kind of, be a catalyst to what we're talking about doing, because certainly I'll be sharing the report with council and calling out some of those policy recommendations. But I do know, because this is in some respects primarily focused on housing opportunity, inclusion, and anti-displacement, there are a number of other policy things that we have to do. I mean, it talks about the fact that the density bonus isn't working, right? So that's another policy opportunity. So it touches on some things that, again, kind of reflect and intersect well with what Paul has put together. But I do think that between this particular policy that's being talked about with the land bank, I mean, we still have things moving positively on the ADUs. You guys teed that up last year. So we've got a couple of things, I think that we can kind of, I don't want to say hang our hat on, but say, there are things bubbling up, and maybe we want to look at how we can do a broader implementation of some of the ideas and seek others.
I like the idea of combination of short-term recommendations that can be brought to them, low-hanging fruit, if you will. And I like the idea of the land bank, and also emphasizing some things that we've already, I think, thought positively about the ADUs and cottage courts, and things that can be done regulatory-wise that hopefully will help in those areas. And then at the same time that we bring them this more comprehensive list, and say to really put together a robust, affordable housing approach in Winston-Salem. We really need to be looking at this whole picture, and we need the resources to help put this together. It was kind of funny. After I put this together, I was thinking, okay, is it possible that the city council was assuming when they set this up that the task force members would be the ones putting together this strategy? And I was thinking to myself, looking at this list, well, even if we did have all the technical expertise to be able to do this, which I don't think we do, it would probably take each of us devoting about a 20-hour week for the next several months to be able to put this together. And, so that to me kind of gave me a sense of we got to have the capacity to really put some heavy work in on getting this. And the way to get that is either through staffing or consulting.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to lose this momentum. And Derwin and Marla, you both made points about cost. How do we take what Paul's put together here and put the cost numbers with it that you rightfully feel we need to present to council? What's that process involved? How do we need to pursue that?
Well, one of the things I would like to do is reach back out to Andrenica Morris, because she mentioned that they actually used 3 consultants, to take different aspects of what they did, and to kind of understand how they divvied up the sections, and why, kind of like what the charge was for each consultant. What is your scope of work? What is your mission? and then what it costs for each consultant. To kind of understand that approach. I mean, I think on one level, I kind of get it, because you had policy, you had data, you had engagement, those are very different skill sets, right? And really maybe trying to find people with some expertise in each of those areas, and that's their focus only, rather than trying to be all things to all people. So I think I understand the logic, but I really want to hear it from her in more detail. And I mean, certainly I could ask her for copies of the RFPs they used, so we could kind of really see what they were asking for and what they were hoping to get out of it. And then, how they arrived at a price. And I do believe that to pay for it, it was a collaborative pool of funds that paid for it. I don't think it was totally underwritten by one entity versus another. So I think that that would be a big part of it. It's just kind of understanding a little bit more. Like I said, I think I understand, because I was there when it was, unfolding. But I want to just make sure I'm clear on what it is, and that you all have a better understanding of what it is. I mean, because if I recall, as it started off with, yes, there was this one organization in the community that started to mobilize people. And what I found remarkable was just the spirit of people willing to come to the table for the greater good, rather than for the benefit of their individual organizations. And then, of course, as you know, ultimately, but not at the beginning, but ultimately a new organization came out of it to manage the process, right? So, how do we find the ability to mobilize enough people in the community to help carry pieces of this, which is what they did, and probably, people will probably have to agree to a set of norms and operating policies, about how it's going to get done, until you can get to the point where there is the capacity somewhere to kind of take it on and then just run with it once the plan itself is done and you're at implementation.
Yep.
So
Marla, I just have a question, and excuse me for not being on video. I'm having connectivity problems, but so once we determine costs, we get back to the point of where's the money coming from, and and I'm just curious about that. About your thoughts about that. I know there is the money that's coming to the city from the CARES Act. Is there an opportunity for the city to retain some of that money for this purpose?
Yeah, I think so. So with the American Rescue Plan, I'm not sure if you all know that the money is actually coming to the city in 2 tranches. And dealing with the first tranches, that's like next week almost, but it's really a few more weeks away when the money will arrive. And then the second batch of money will arrive next year. And so right now there are a number of teams in the city working on what is the process, what are the priorities, how are we gonna do this? And I'm actually on one of the teams for the process. While on one hand, I think that this could potentially align, I'm thinking that from a timing perspective, we might miss the first round just because we still got some work to do. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other dollars that we might be able to tap within either this department or somewhere that, when coupled with other resources, could get us started. So I think that there could be, it just depends on what is ultimately decided about how the utilization of those dollars will be prioritized. but I'm already trying to look at particular pots that might be something I could tap. So I think as I'm looking at cost and how to fund, I'm looking outside of the American Rescue Plan just because of a timing situation. Now, it could be that there's some initial dollars that I just have to find internally to get us started, but then maybe by the time we're ready for the second tranche of money, we're in a place where we could potentially do an application and get funded. You know, again, it depends on what the priorities are that council establishes. But I'm hunting for internal money right now, rather than waiting to see what comes out of the processes and the prioritization of the use of those funds.
Marla, if I'm understanding right, that first part is 20-something million that's coming on May 11th. Mm-hmm. So do you think that allocating a couple $100,000 for hiring a consultant to flesh out this plan is not something that would be eligible for that? Or are you thinking it would have to be kind of a more hard project, an implementation project or something like that?
No, the big thing right now is what is council's priority, you know, because, you know, are the funds going to be prioritized to help groups recover? You know, so small businesses, you know, your arts and, you know, different folks, and even the city's own gaps, budget gaps, right? And so I think that, they haven't decided yet how the dollars will be prioritized, but my gut tells me that this first round of money will probably be used more to help folks recover. Would it help at all? I know as part of that, the council is inviting the public to give its suggestions at an upcoming input session. Mm-hmm. Wednesday
would it be
at 4
helpful,
o'clock.
Even if it weren't successful this time, would it be helpful if the task force sent something to the council as part of that saying, hey, we've got this need to put together this housing strategy. We think there should be some funding. Would it help kind of put this on the radar screen and get it, or you think that's premature to do that?
Well, I mean, anytime you have an opportunity to advocate for what you want, you know, you never pass it up. I was just trying to think really quickly about some of the requirements or stipulations that come with the funds, you know, in terms of maybe its relationship to COVID, right? You know, are we trying to address something that COVID had an impact on? Those kinds of things. But, you know, I'm a big advocate, you know. Before here, that was my day job, was advocacy, right? So I always say advocate. But just
No, that was the point, Marla. I was just going to reiterate to Paul's point, is that I think that, like most things, but housing, just like the small business, housing has been hit dramatically by COVID. In particular, housing accessible for folks 80% below, and particularly 50% and below, drastically. Mm-hmm. And so what we started talking about before is in a totally different world in terms of access for folks. And so I think that this does center kind of in terms of when we talk about COVID response, is like the crisis we were in before, we're in deeper water. Yeah, we're in much deeper water than we were before. And so how do we kind of expedite the conversation in this, in terms of, because the water is deeper, because of COVID, and because of that crunch we're in, does this push this a little bit quicker? Or can we shape it so that it can be clear to folks how much more important this was than it was beforehand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really about framing. You know, which gets back to some of our earlier conversations about communication and how we frame it, right? So, I would say, by all means, you know, tune in, you know, make your comments. Because they're taking live comments. I don't know, they may be taking written comments as well, but I know it's a live session.
But I mean, to Paul's point, what if we did it as a group? Would that make more of an impact if we said, look, you've got the mayor's affordable housing coalition already established. As Derwin just said very well, housing has been really impacted by COVID. We have this coalition. We need to accelerate what it can do. The way to accelerate it is to get more funding so the ideas that we have put together here can start to be done. And I just think it would be more powerful if we did it, as a group.
Yeah. And I think that's possible. And Paul's seen them too, in terms of when groups come and present to the council, everybody's kind of scripted. So everybody kind of has a part that they play and go in and read out and engage. And so if that's what we decide we want to do, I think there's ways for us to do that if we wanted to kind of do it from a written standpoint. Not sure if they're taking written ones or not. But if it is live, then there's some coordination we need to do to figure out how we wanted to make the presentation. And I think it could be impactful to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like I said, in the meantime,
Paul, if you're talking, you're on mute. If you were.
I do think it would need to come from the task force as a whole, as opposed to just individuals who are saying that. But
yeah.
And certainly, in the meantime, I can reach out at least to get more background on the housing NOLA thing, so we can be running on parallel tracks here, still trying to get more info and, some additional TA or support or something.
Yeah.
Would you be able to get a quick just brush on some of this, what it cost if you went through housing NOLA? Because I'm sure from what you all are saying, that's going to be the response is, well, how much money are you all talking about? So
their cost plus inflation and what they paid.
Well, and I'm primarily looking at what they paid the consultants and what they were asking the consultants to do, more so than what it would be for housing NOLA to help us. Because I don't know where they are with that kind of stuff just yet.
I was just saying to get from them advice on or do you know that yourself, the consultant side, because we're going to be, the pushback is going to be, well, how much do you all want? And
right. So I want to just hear from them a baseline and see the scope of work that each of the consultants did. That would kind of give me an idea. Okay. And then, of course, like with what we have here from Paul, I would look at it from a broader perspective in terms of, again, that overarching. We've got policy we need to consider. Obviously, we've got financing we need to consider. The whole thing around data, not only to inform implementation, but for reporting during implementation, right? And so, what are those overarching areas? And then I see where what Paul has done kind of feeding into certain buckets of the overarching, as well as, with a number of these things, I think is where that whole community engagement becomes important too. Because as we talk about housing types, be it preservation or new construction, what does community think about some of these different types? For instance, in the For Everyone Home report, it talks about our zoning and allowing for more duplexes, triplexes, and quads, right? Well, that kind of fits in here, but we know, okay, community comes out depending on where you are, and is very vocal about those housing types. Well, we need to have that conversation across the whole community because some parts of our community don't want them, some are. Well, so anyway, y'all know all of this, but the idea is, I'm looking at a number of elements here as being part of the community conversations so that we can hear and understand what community is wanting and needing. Because while I might think I know, I could be dead wrong, right? And so, so a lot of these things here are ripe for those community engagement sessions. You know, tell us what you think, tell us what you want, tell us what you don't want, you know, all of that. So, I mean, yeah, it's a lot, but I do see these as part of how you start to roll out the creation of that implementation plan.
Yeah. Marla, do you think that by Tuesday, maybe, or you could have maybe a response from folks in housing maybe just on what they paid, kind of like that gives us a sense? Since I don't know, do you think we need to, on Wednesday, if we were going before the council, we need to have a specific number there? We just need to frame the argument?
I think you frame the argument on Wednesday, because there's going to be some kind of application process.
Gotcha. Okay.
And we're still trying to figure out what that is and what that looks like.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So we just need to work on framing the argument for Wednesday. Okay.
Mm-hmm. With the community engagement piece, do you see that as another RFP process? Probably.
Yeah.
And another question I had was about the bond. You know, the work that we did with the housing condition assessment was to try to move toward a bond referendum to be able to rehab some houses. But I guess it's about timing. Do you see that? I mean, you know, we've been in this planning mode, I guess, 2 years now. And as we move toward an implementation phase, how do you see that in terms of timing? How long might this take?
Putting together the actual implementation plan?
Yes, that's the whole process of getting to the council and having, all of that.
So I see two trips to council. First trip is, this is what we want to do. Do we have your blessings? Can we get some support? And what does that support look like that we're asking for? That's our first trip. I would say if we didn't make that trip in June to council, I would say that'd be August maybe. And I'm almost inclined to say possibly August, just to give us enough time to do our due diligence so that when we come to them, we're tight, right? Then I think the second trip is, and I mean, I'm just gonna guess, just based on the experience of New Orleans, I would say it would be a year later when we say, here is what community put together as a plan to actually get the housing that we want. And council approved that. So I see the first trip is, this is what we want to do. This is what it looks like. This is why. This is what it'll cost. And then the second trip is after we've gone through the whole process of targeting, how many units per year, what types of units, all of those details. Then we come to council for approval roughly a year later. And you know, the thing that takes the reason New Orleans took a year was to do the engagement, to have all of those meetings throughout the year. So, you know, and I think that's the thing that we have to make sure council understands is the depth and breadth of community engagement. Because the last thing we need to do is not have good community engagement. You know, we're just shooting ourselves, you know, in the foot if we don't. But that is what took the time. Mm-hmm.
Marla, one additional question, and maybe for the group and for yourself as well, is in addition to the cost, the technical cost of actually putting the actual implementation plan together, the other number that I thought would be helpful to gather and understand and get to the council in this first phase is actually what is the public subsidy that we may understand from the numbers we already know. So we know we're going to need X number of units. The market's going to take care of this percentage. And then this number is going to be what is likely going to need some additional public subsidy. Is there a pathway that we could recommend that council goes ahead with if they're shopping or thinking about a housing bond, that doesn't have to wait until a year after this plan goes forward. But hey, we think you need to try to raise $150 million in a housing bond. While you're doing that, we're finalizing this implementation plan so that if you're shopping this housing bond out there, when those dollars are available, we have both the money and we have the implementation plan together now that can actualize what we have, rather than maybe the plan and then now having to go wait on a bond or something.
That could be part of the work that goes with this, right? As you're pulling it all together, you've got a working group or whatever whose job it is to pencil the deal, right? That's just like one of the other things with the For Everyone Home was, us doing that housing condition survey to get a sense of, how much might really be needed in rehab dollars, right? So while we piloted one area, we had some questions about the data and what it's really showing us. And I have a follow-up meeting with Aaron King in planning about it next week. But one of the recommendations is we do a full housing condition survey for the city, right? Then you'll know how many units are maybe in distress and need help. So that's one place to start. But I think as part of creating the plan, that is a part of it. People start to say, what is the need in this area or this type of housing? What is the likely cost? And who all together can help support it, right? So I think that, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, because those calculations can be achieved while all of the other pieces are happening. And certainly a recommendation can be made around the particular size of a bond initiative. Because I know there's some talk about trying to do one maybe next year, as well as the talk about doing a local housing trust fund, right? So the information that can come out of this as folks are doing the different types of drill down research. We have some stuff already, then we have some anecdotal stuff, but when you start to drill down and you get into the data stuff, right? Like Paul has outlined here. Yeah, as that information becomes available, certainly it's information. So you always want to share that, because that information will inform the final plan.
Yeah, and I think for me, just wondering the timing of it, like when do we make that? That's the option. Like when do we do? Just wondering when's the best timing, because if council was looking at, if there's conversation, is there a way to kind of pitch them and set them in a good way on when they go with it? Do they decide that, hey, this is a bond initiative we want to put on the primary ballot that may be in March or in May of next year? Or is this something they decide they want to put on a general election ballot that would be in November of next year? And so I think all of those different timeframes impact kind of how we position. That's just why I was wondering, like, is that something we try to throw out, hey, and when we go in a June or August, or is that something that you're saying you wait while you're going through the process that may not come until, January, February of next year, which again impacts all of the timing pieces in that. So that's just walking through my mind and just kind of my thinking on that. But somebody else is saying something too.
Well, I understand that a little bit better now. Thanks for clarifying. I will say, I don't think we have the capacity to bring that before or bring that by August. We don't staff-wise, and being able to find a consultant who could do that, because I think it requires some additional data gathering. We need data, right? So I could see that being a priority. So let's say council gives us the green light in August, and we hit the ground with some RFPs. And depending on how we do the RFPs for the consultants, whichever type of consultant this would fall under, we would make it known that, okay, priority one is getting this research, getting this data, so that we can provide this to council to help inform the bond referendum, right? So I think that, but I think we would definitely need some experts to do that. Between us and planning, that we just don't have that. Even just as city staff, we don't have that capacity. So we would need a third party, but that could be a priority, you know, in terms of their scope of work, is you tackle this issue first, then you get to some of these others, you know. So I think that might have to be the way to approach it.
Based on the group that we have with us today, what, I think it was Derwin who said it earlier, what's the low-hanging fruit that we can go ahead and take care of as soon as possible? Because, you know, we're going into our third year, and I really believe it's important that we are able to show something that we've been able to accomplish so far. If we don't really have a working plan right now, is it something that we can put a timeline on and just say, okay, here are 1 or 2 initiatives that we can go ahead and knock out first? Is the group able, or are we willing to, based on the affordable housing strategy elements, can we look at something today or the next meeting just to say, hey, let's knock out one or 2 goals from the 5 sections? I mean, is that realistic, or is that not something we're prepared to do?
Well, if I could just add something real quickly. Mm-hmm. So when you look at number 3,
duplexes, townhomes, small multifamily, huh?
Well, you got ADUs. You know, you guys have already started teeing that up. That's moving. That's been to council, right? And council has said, let's go forward with coming up with revised ordinance. So that's a win that you have almost around the corner.
And it passed the cottage.
Yeah.
Right. Uh-huh. Okay.
Right. So I think that you're already getting some wins. Excuse me. You know, I think but for COVID, we would probably be a little further along with employer-assisted housing. That was moving well, and I think we'll probably in the next, I'm thinking 4 to 5 months, we might be able to really talk more about that in earnest.
Well, I actually have, I need some help, but I have committed to Novant because they came out with their critical care edition that they're going to be doing. So I went and met with them and said, wouldn't this be a great opportunity to do some employee assisted housing? And they said, what have you got? And I said, well, I don't have a proposal together yet. How much time do I have? They said, well, get us something by August. So if we can come back to them, and I'm just one that's never going to say no. I'm just saying, okay. So now we got to find a way to do it if we can. But that would be something we could legitimately say, you know, we are pushing forward with. Because I know that money's been circled, the $250,000, and if I was on council, I would be saying, well, what are you all doing with that $250? So that's why I've been pushing so hard on it. But I need to probably get back with you, Marla, and figure out, now that I've created this thing, how do I go about in the next 3 to 4 months getting something back to Novant? So,
I have a quick question, and I may have to leave. I have another meeting that conflicted. But, and Darren, this is a question for you. Might there be an emergency that occurs with housing after the moratorium is lifted? And how does the council take such actions when there is an emergency? I mean, the data is not in about how COVID has impacted if people who maybe get evicted. But are there some emergency actions that council take to address such emergencies?
So the short is no, in the sense of the council itself. The council could have the ability to attempt to appropriate resources or funds to help, which they've already done, and with some resources. And I know that launched open April 1st, wasn't it, Marla, the RUMA program? April 5th.
ERAP was April 5th, and RUMA was March 29th.
Yeah, so 2 programs out there to support and try to help folks around mortgage and utility assistance in multiple areas. But to your point, even when you look at the those numbers and how many people could be helped, if even if all those funds go out the door, you're still going to have probably a large number of individuals who may be behind on some things. And so it has the very big potential to create an issue, but the council on its own right now, they're outside of financial resources to figure out how they could appropriate, don't have a lot of authority in that process. The council cannot stop the evictions. They have no power to stop folks from getting evicted at all. The council or county commissioners, none of them have that power to stop that themselves. All they could offer potentially would be financial resources or figuring out how to create some additional mitigation programs.
But that's where this newest tranche of COVID relief funds could help. Yeah. So that could be something that I'm sure they're already thinking about, but we need to make sure it's on their radar screen. Getting back to what George
But there's an additional pot of money actually that's coming down for housing.
Yeah.
Separate from the rescue plan. So there's additional dollars, but I'll also say just a little bit to close that one out. One of the things that we are doing or proposing with emergency rental assistance is that, because we have some situations where landlords don't want to participate in the program for a host of reasons, some of which don't make good business sense. But one of the things that we're doing is we're making an ask to the court, that handles evictions, to see if they will allow us to, or if they will create an account or fund that that tenant, on their behalf, we can put the rent, the past due rent, in that account. So if the landlord decides to go and evict them when the moratorium expires for non-payment, the money's sitting there, and we can tell the court the money's here to pay them. For whatever their reasons were, they didn't want to participate. Here's their rent that they wouldn't take. Give them their money and dismiss the eviction action, right? So we're looking at ways to mitigate what might happen come July 1 if the moratorium isn't extended further. So we're trying to be creative and proactive at the same time, because we see that some landlords won't participate. And so we're trying to come up with a number of strategies to be ready come July 1 if that moratorium isn't extended. Okay, sorry, Paul.
Thanks. Oh, that's all right. Thanks, I wanted to get back to what George had brought up, low-hanging fruit. And in trying to answer that, we touched on a couple things, the ADUs, the cottage courts, it's already in front of council being discussed. Tom mentioned employer-assisted housing as something that could be jumped on. And then, Marla, you had brought up the land banking thing that could be done. So I think land banking is actually something very real that could be done, even though the ultimate use of the land and the disposition of the land might be a little longer term. We at least can get control of some land, buy troubled properties, buy vacant land that would be suitable for different types of affordable housing.
And with that, there is a portion of the bond budget that's designated for targeted acquisition. Yeah. So there are some dollars just for that purpose. If we identify what are key parcels to go after, then we have that already in the budget to do that for just this reason, right? It's like Aaron always likes to say, we're not growing more land, right? This is all we got. So we need to be as proactive and strategic about acquisition as possible. Yeah, so we'll definitely want to do that.
Yeah. I just want to kind of do just a pulse check where we are. I know we're at right at 11:06. I know Paul has to jump off 11:30, and then
needs to go too.
And Paula there. So just in terms of kind of like maybe circle around on our action here, if folks are understand where we are. So first, what I hear us looking to do is we want to gather something. If it's consensus of the group, we like to do something to prepare to present to council on Wednesday when they have their public comment periods and accepted public comments on how to use this first tranche of COVID funds, which means that we have to work pretty quickly here to find a time that we, whether we're communicating via email or something to kind of get our narrative, what we're going to say, how we want to shape that. and then who is going to make themselves available at that time to actually get on the call to walk through that. And so first, everyone's on, there's a good consensus. That's what we want to do, the step we want to take.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so from there, timing wise, so I think Paul's done a good job of kind of putting the initial bones on something we can say, we can frame. How do we want to move on putting, I guess, an actual narrative or what we would say associated with that?
Could someone else actually draft up kind of a statement or a request that we as a task force would do, kind of draft that up and then send that out by email to everybody, and then, you know, we can comment on it and revise it, you know, from there?
Yeah, I'm willing to put that together and get something out by tomorrow to folks to take a look at. Anybody, unless someone else wants to. Okay. Okay. And then
my only question would be, this is the form that we're using, the affordable housing strategy elements, or will you add some more ideas? Or it might be a good idea also to talk about what we have been able to move along, just to tee it up. I know you won't have a lot of time, but just to tee it up, to let them know what we have been able to accomplish, and mention what, 1 or 2 from each section. Is that the plan?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, kind of to start off, hey, kind of a recap, what we've done, what we've accomplished. This is where we are. This is what we think we need, kind of thing, but putting it back out to the group to then workshop from everyone else in terms of what's missing, what we need to add. And then I guess as the group for Wednesday, we could then parse that up in terms of if it's not something that would be received written and we want to do it verbally or like this through this form to the council, then we can kind of break that up on who takes which section to share to the council at that time. That's what I was thinking. Does that work for everyone else?
Yep.
Okay.
And Derwin, real quick, because it was your idea and your concept, and I would encourage you to try and find a way to blend it into this. The concept of synergy between what we're doing and what the bond issue will need, that, you know, there's a way to share the resources. So while we're asking for these resources, a lot of what we're going to come up with and need, I would think, can go into what's going to be needed for the bond and vice versa. So to make council start thinking, hey, you know, that this can be helpful to get the bond moving also.
Okay.
Now, let me ask this. Let's say Derwin is getting out the draft of the statement. We all kind of play with it and get to a point where we are saying, yes, this is what should be said. Do we need a quorum of the task force to say yes on that, for that to be officially submitted?
Whoa, good point.
I think so, Marla. So we probably need to make sure that goes to the whole group and that folks are okay with that or respond to that, you think?
Yeah, it should go to the whole group, because even like right now, we don't have a quorum on the call. Yeah, but I think to send it to the whole group and get consensus. And you need 6. We got out of the 10.
Somebody text Joe. You just tell them to respond yes. Yeah.
We will find Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes it. We can make sure the whole group gets it, and then we can go from there. Okay. And we'll have in there just kind of put some timing on there, just because again we want to be prepared for that on for Wednesday. Okay. All right, and then yeah, Paula she's dropping off here in a second. So so from there, I'm just coming back to the agenda on where we were. Some of the other areas here, I guess, where we're changing or doing things, we definitely will need to have the rest of the group in play to talk through that. But in terms of we look at coalition structure, working groups, that's been out there for time in terms of, are we continuing? If so, how do we do that? And then how we, engagement of coalition members. And I think that's really in terms of kind of the overall work and engagement, making sure folks feel engaged and are pulled into different areas of that. And I'd say in just get a thought in hindsight of the conversation we just had on how we want to move forward. I guess the thought of the working groups would likely probably end up in those spaces if that's what the group ends up saying, this is the way we want to move forward. But kind of pause and open up Marlon, the rest of the team on any thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think Tom has some thoughts as well. I think we actually started teeing up things in the working groups, and so switching our schedule has made it a little bit more challenging for staff to say, okay, how do we get together, essentially a second time during a month to kind of talk about some of the other opportunities and possibilities, kind of as like we had done before. So I think that is something that we probably need to think about, is how do we get some of the legwork done, especially as we're working towards potentially, teeing up the creation of a housing plan. So I do think that's something we probably need to talk more about, and see what's going to make sense. Because it could be that once we get into the formal part of putting together the housing plan, it could be that, maybe each member serves in one of the working groups as part of the plan, right? Or something like that. But then, quite honestly, the coalition may have still its own responsibilities and things to do alongside the teaming up of the housing plan. So we have to kind of give that some thought as well. I mean, the purpose for being here as a group won't necessarily diminish or, fade into the background for a while. So then what might that look like as far as member engagement and working groups? Because I would anticipate that everyone would be involved in some aspect with the housing plan part, but then what does that say for your day-to-day responsibilities? And I don't have an answer to that right now. I think that's something we'd have to really think about as this unfolds. Tom, I think you had some ideas maybe, or some questions?
No, it was just a thought, a process of like we're doing today, just brainstorming. But I guess it was just that now that we're looking at this structure, this, like you were just saying, this new housing plan, to wait and get that solidified, and then do basically exactly what you were just saying, Marla, and then use that to divvy up amongst ourselves tasks and groups and whatever. And then also I was really hoping that we could kind of push ourselves a little bit and not get in a situation where I think I've felt where it's just, okay, we're done, we'll see you in 30 days. To kind of say, okay, in the meantime, these groups can be meeting, in 2 weeks from now, whatever. But to just continue to try and keep some consistency going between the monthly meetings, I think would be helpful. And so using these groups to do that might be a way to do it. But I think for now, we just need to focus on what we've been talking about for most of this meeting and help Derwin get this thing put together for Wednesday and move forward with that, and then look at groups after that.
Tom, I missed part of what you said, but one idea about the use of these groups is I see that the 3 groups were actually named in the resolution from the council creating the task force.
Oh boy.
So I don't know if they can easily be done away with or changed or whatever, but I think for example, if the housing strategy that we're putting together is somewhere along the lines of those 5 major points in this outline.
Yeah.
We could assign one or more of those to each of those groups there. So we could have that farmed out so that the groups could be focusing on different pieces of that. So
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Paul, for bringing that up, because, I mean, we have a basic framework, which could also help. So we have housing stock, access and services, and long-term planning.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, you know, and thinking about long-term planning, that potentially being policy, potentially, I don't know. But you see, so, you know, we may have an overarching framework to start from, or, you know, doesn't mean that, you know, that while those might be the primary things that were listed in the legislation, it doesn't mean that limits us.
Yeah.
Right? That's just maybe the baseline of definitely having these core groups. And then there could be more, because I suspect there probably need to be more, you know, just based on what we have learned thus far. There may be a need for more.
Yeah.
So, we got some stuff to flesh out.
So to that
But can I say something real quick? And this kind of touches on what George was saying earlier about, you know, getting some wins under our belt and some small hanging fruit. You know, I think that we maybe not have given ourselves enough credit yet, you know, because when you think about it, we actually were formed 2 years ago, right? And it takes a while with a brand new group with a brand new mission, no roadmap, to really kind of get your arms around, okay, who are we and what are we supposed to do? And how do we do it, right? And so I think that while it may not seem that we've done much or as much as maybe you would have wanted, you know, I do think it's important to recognize that you have done quite a bit. And I mean, and the depth of some of the conversations that we've had, I think that you're doing a little better than you think. So I just wanted to offer that up. Because yeah, we're 2 years old this month, maybe, in terms of our very first meeting. So I think we're doing all right. I mean, I know that we want to like knock the ball out the park, right? I get that first at bat, but I think we're coming along pretty good, quite honestly.
Well, we've had a little more than a year under COVID too. So.
True. Yeah, because I know COVID has disrupted a whole lot of plans I had for work that I wanted to accomplish in this last year. And having to pivot to do a lot of CARES Act stuff and so forth, I wasn't able to. So thanks for that reminder as well, Paul. But I just wanted to lift that up for a minute.
Yeah. Well, and I just said it's good to have the balance, because you have the folks who, again, the practitioners who are in space with like the urgency of right now to do, and then the ability also to have that strategic vantage point of, okay, how do we get there? How do we walk through it? So it gives us that push to keep pushing down the road, but also to make sure we're framing it and getting it and doing it right as we try to move forward. So I think it's a good balance from the team overall in that. So, yeah.
I'd like to offer something also. When we work with demolition cases and research properties that we can take to council, we have found that during COVID, since last probably February, we've had a lot of property owners repair properties. I don't know what that has been due to. Maybe they've been at home, or maybe they utilized, I don't know what that's due to. It's probably a number of layered reasons, but we've had a lot of properties that were on their way that could have gone to council for consideration, but those properties, and still are, I get calls all the time where people are purchasing these properties, or they're the owners themselves, or they're heirs, and they're repairing properties. So a lot of that is happening, and that's increased tripled since I first started here 4 years ago. So I'm really surprised and happy to see that.
Yeah, and Sharon, I was gonna say that could be. I know it's a good on the face of numbers, but that could be a good and bad thing that's happening associated with that, and that may be good where some of this data stuff comes into play in the request, because the question is, if they're getting purchased by folks, well, and they're rehabbing them. Are they rehabbing them, to do market rate housing? Are they rehabbing them, who's moving into these units? How is it? Or are they, as some of these big investment folks end up doing, they rehab these properties and they actually don't even rent them out. They invest the money in the property. They just hold them because they work the whole tax system stuff out where they invest it, don't rent them out, and they just kind of sit. So a lot of that's interesting. And again, some of that data, but again, you all just have a part of the data. And I think that speaks back into the sense of, a big thing of understanding what's going on in the community is understanding the data, understanding what's happening. We just we don't have currently don't have full capacity to dig deeper beyond kind of what's happening. But on the surface, I think that is really good. Folks actually taking care of it, trying to, at the very least, it makes the neighborhoods look better.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah. So from there on now, I guess for what I'm hearing from folks, we'll hold this conversation on what how the working groups are going to work as we kind of navigate through how this plan will unfold. We do want to come back to it, but we're not quite sure how that should work at this point. Again, we don't have the rest of the group on, so we'll hold that conversation. Sounds good. Okay. And again, we can't take action on the next item as well, which was the election of officers here. And this is one, and I was mentioning at the end of the last meeting, I know we had to close out pretty quickly on that one, was, Marla, do you know if City Attorney's Office would be open to an email piece, or maybe we do it, just looking at the time, I know this is maybe second month around trying to get this part of it done, and just wondering around timing. I'm just wondering if folks would send in folks who are interested in serving, and if they're, how we could do that to make sure that we don't fly past any of what they're asking to make sure we get done.
Let me reach out to the city attorney's office. I was going to invite John Lawson into the meeting had we, decided to go a little bit deeper around the structure and the officers, had we had a quorum. He was on standby to join us. But let me check with him and then get an email out to the group. I'm almost inclined to think that it'll have to be done as part of a regular meeting.
Okay.
That's my inclination.
Okay.
But I'll confirm and let you know.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. And then I think we may have hit on in the beginning discussion around just some of the areas here below on updates from committees. But all right, are there any other updates from any of the standing committees for us to discuss?
I've just got two updates on the long-term planning. The glossary of terms is complete. Complete in the sense of we've got a final document. I think there's always an opportunity to add more terms as time goes by, but it is complete. So we'll put it in the OneDrive. If anybody wants their own individual copy, just let us know and we can send you a copy. But then we're also looking to place it on our website so that it'll be accessible even to the public. So that has been completed. So like I said, if you want an individual copy, just let us know and we can get you one. On the housing condition survey under housing stock, like I mentioned earlier, I've been meeting with Aaron and his staff on just what does the data show us. And we have a meeting on that coming up. I think it's next Thursday or Friday. So in our May meeting, I'll be able to share what it looks like. And we may be able to provide a map, so I'll share my screen and show you that information. Because again, depending on what it shows us, does this kind of help make the case for doing a citywide housing conditions survey, which is one of the recommendations coming out of the For Everyone Home initiative, is that we do that. So I can share that result of the pilot survey next month. And then Tom's already mentioned employer assisted housing, unless there's something more.
Nope. All done.
Okay. All right. That there other comments, commentary, conversation from the group.
Derwin, a piece of low-hanging fruit, as we've been saying. I have to credit Paul with this, I think, because I was brainstorming a while back and he mentioned this. The website, somebody, I assume on the city somewhere works on the website. Can they just add us and kind of get our name out there and create a contact entity? You know, it wouldn't take a lot, and it would start getting people aware that, you know, they got some information, or I guess maybe we can start the process, and then if we get what we're trying to get pushed through, we can publish it there. But it's just something we can at least mention when we're trying to build up a list of accomplishments, that that's something we're working on.
Let me look into that, Tom, because we are listed under the boards and commissions.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah, there's a link for us, and it lists all the members and your terms.
Okay.
But let me find out what all else can be a part of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm thinking, because we can, that's a quickie to just say, you know, we're building the website.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe some of our key documents can be posted there.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, we'll look into that.
I just wanted to mention, if that outline that I put together, I consider that the property of the task force. So please don't, please feel free to add to it. Think that there's, I mean, there may be some things that should be reworded or whatever. So I take no pride of authorship there. Just let, yeah, that needs to be a work in progress, I guess. So
can we get that in the OneDrive, maybe, so that it can be a document in the OneDrive that could be edited in kind of a living document, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and everybody having ability to edit the document. Yeah, we'll work with that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. With that, there anyone else? George?
No, I'm on mute. No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Looking forward to seeing what you put out there, Derb.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Marla, anything else for us?
No, I think we're good. Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, cool. All right, with that, then I'll get out again at the latest. It could be late this evening, but at the latest tomorrow, I'll have a draft out to folks on a statement and see if we can workshop it so that we can prepare for Wednesday. And then if not, from there, our next Affordable Housing Coalition meeting. And that's when, Marla? Is it
28th. So that's the Friday of Memorial Day weekend.
Ooh. Might want to rethink that.
Just saying.
Might want to rethink that.
Yeah.
You might want to move that up a week.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, I'm looking at my calendar now. Like,
Everybody's like, oh.
yeah,
Move it up a day, move it up a week. I don't know. You kind of, you know.
No,
I want to think about it
on a vacation. That sounds like the first vacation in a year and a half. I don't know.
yeah.
Well, you know, you might want to do a poll, Darwin, and see what everyone else thinks and what the options might be. If you want to do it the week before or the day before, or you know, maybe just do a poll and let us know.
I've got to go.
Okay.
All right,
take it easy now.
Yeah.
Hey,
Okay.
Derwin, thanks for taking that on, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Bye.
No problem. All right. Well, cool. Thanks, Marla. Thanks, folks.
All right.
All right, y'all take it easy.
Take
Enjoy
care.
your
Have a
weekend.
good weekend.
All right.
All
Okay.
right, bye-bye.